You wake up, check your phone, notifications, emails, headlines. Another day begins. You drag yourself into a routine, coffee, commute, endless tasks. You smile when you're supposed to, nod when expected, perform, deliver, scroll, repeat. But beneath it all, there's something you can't quite explain. Not just tiredness, not just stress. Something emptier. It's like your soul is underwater, slowed, dulled, drifting. You wonder why rest never really works anymore. Why vacations feel like delays. Why even when everything's fine, something feels profoundly wrong. This isn't burnout. It's not depression. It's something else, something spiritual. We live in a world that treats exhaustion like a badge of honor. If you're not tired, you're not trying hard enough. If you're not chasing, you're falling behind. We've learned to function with souls running on empty. But what if the real crisis isn't physical at all? What if you're not just tired? What if you're spiritually drained? There was a man who saw this coming over 200 years ago. A man whose philosophy could explain the quiet, invisible despair of our modern lives. Arthur Schopenhauer. He believed that life was not a gift, but a curse. That human beings were not guided by reason or love, but by a blind, unrelenting force he called the will. A primal urge that drives all things to crave, to struggle, to want. To Schopenhauer, life wasn't about finding happiness. It was about surviving suffering, a cycle of endless wanting and inevitable disappointment. Sound extreme? Maybe. But look around. We chase success, status, connection, stimulation. And the more we chase, the more hollow we become. Like moths to a flame that always burns and never satisfies. Our culture tells us we're exhausted because we're overworked. But Schopenhauer might say the opposite. We're exhausted because we can't stop wanting. The world drains us not because it demands too much, but because it never lets us be. This is not a self-help video. This is a wake-up call. What you're feeling, the numbness, the emptiness, the sense that something is slipping away, isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. A spiritual erosion caused by a life built on constant striving. And if we're going to understand what's really happening to us, we need to go deeper, beyond biology, beyond psychology, into the raw, unsettling truths of human existence itself. In this video, we'll explore the dark brilliance of Schopenhauer's philosophy, how his bleak vision of life can explain our modern emptiness, and more importantly, how it can offer a rare, paradoxical kind of peace. Because, in a world addicted to noise, Schopenhauer offers silence. In a culture obsessed with happiness, he speaks of truth. And in a time where everyone is running, he dares to stop and see. So let's begin. You're not just tired. You're not just overworked. You are spiritually drained. And the question is, what now? To understand why you feel so empty, we have to confront a disturbing idea. What if suffering isn't a bug in the system, but the system itself? Schopenhauer didn't romanticize life. He tore the mask off it. Where most philosophers clung to optimism, he didn't. Where others spoke of purpose, love, and progress, he saw delusion. He believed that behind everything we do, behind love, ambition, desire, even survival, there is one force pulling the strings, the will. But this isn't the willpower you hear about in motivational speeches. It's not about determination or discipline. Schopenhauer's will is deeper. It's blind, irrational, primal. It's the endless urge to exist, to grow, to reproduce, to want. It has no direction, no goal, only one instinct. More. Every living thing is a slave to it. Plants stretch toward the sun. Animals fight to eat. Humans build, chase, destroy, all because of this invisible force pulsing beneath the surface. We don't choose it. We are it. And because the will never rests, we never do either. You feel like something is always missing? That's the will. You achieve something and still feel empty? That's the will. You rest, yet wake up more tired than before? The will, Again, it's a curse wrapped in instinct, a hunger that never ends. Schopenhauer wrote, "All striving springs from want or deficiency, hence it is suffering." Let that sink in. We only move, only act, only live, because we lack something, and when we get it, the satisfaction is fleeting. The craving returns. The cycle repeats. Desire, struggle, attainment, boredom, new desire, it's a treadmill. And the more we run, the more spiritually bankrupt we become. We exhaust ourselves trying to fill a void that is wired into the human condition. Schopenhauer didn't believe in progress. He thought history was just the same mistakes on loop, new faces, same desires, same delusions. He believed that to live was to suffer, not occasionally but inherently. Sounds depressing, maybe. But here's the twist. He wasn't trying to depress you. He was trying to liberate you. Because once you understand that suffering is built into existence, you stop blaming yourself. You stop thinking something's wrong with you. You stop frantically trying to fix your life with productivity, hacks, better routines, or more achievements. You realize you're not broken. The world is. You are not malfunctioning. You are responding, perfectly rationally, to a system that never lets you rest, never lets you be, never lets you just exist without a goal, a plan, a pressure. That sense of spiritual exhaustion isn't weakness. It's awareness. It's the soul recognizing that it's been dragged by the will for too long and wants to step off the ride. But how? Schopenhauer offered no easy answers. Because there aren't any. You can't kill the will. You can't escape life, but you can see it, you can recognize it. And in that recognition, something profound happens. You start to suffer less because you stop expecting happiness from a world that isn't designed to give it. You stop demanding meaning from a system powered by chaos. You stop participating in illusions that drain your soul. Instead, you begin to observe, to withdraw, to live differently. Not as a consumer, not as a chaser, but as someone who sees through it all. And in that shift, you begin to reclaim something sacred. Not happiness, not comfort, but clarity. Look around you. Everything, from ads to algorithms, self-help books to social media feeds, screams one message. You should be happy. You're told to hustle harder, smile more, manifest success, optimize your mornings, journal your gratitude, and chase your best self. But the more we chase it, the more elusive happiness becomes. Like grabbing smoke with bare hands. The promise is everywhere, but the feeling? Rare, fleeting, faint. Why? Because Schopenhauer would argue, happiness is not the natural state of man. He believed that what we call happiness is simply the brief absence of suffering, a pause, a lull in the storm. Happiness is negative in its nature, he wrote. Only the cessation of a pain or a want gives pleasure. Think about that. Relief from hunger feels like pleasure. Escaping danger feels like peace. Solving a problem brings satisfaction, but only because the problem existed in the first place. We don't feel happy, we feel less in pain. And in those rare short windows of relief, we mistake it for joy. Modern life, however, has no patience for this truth. It sells happiness as a product, a goal, a lifestyle. Buy this, post that, date them, travel here, quit your job, meditate, do yoga, take supplements, achieve, upgrade, transform. We've created an entire economy based on your dissatisfaction. Because if you were truly content, you'd stop consuming, you'd stop scrolling, you'd stop needing. And that's a problem. For them. So instead, you're taught to chase happiness like a high. But no one tells you that highs fade. No one tells you that joy, like a shadow, follows pain. We're spiritually drained, not just because we're tired, but because we're lied to. Every single day. Lied to about what it means to live well. Lied to about what happiness is. Lied to about who we're supposed to be, and we internalize these lies. We start to believe that if we're not smiling, not thriving, not winning, then we must be failing. That if we feel heavy, numb, disconnected, there must be something wrong with us. But Schopenhauer flips that. He says the struggle is not failure, it's reality. He doesn't pretend the world is kind. He doesn't decorate it with fantasies. He gives you the raw, unfiltered version of existence, and in doing so, he allows you to breathe. Because suddenly, you don't have to pretend anymore. You don't have to chase what was never real. You don't have to carry the unbearable weight of being happy. You can just exist. In stillness. In awareness. In truth. We suffer more when we believe we shouldn't suffer. We feel more lost when we think we should be happy. We drain our spirits trying to align with a fantasy that never truly fit us. And that's the sickness of the modern world. It gives you the illusion of control while keeping you chained to endless craving. It tells you to be free while keeping you addicted. It promises fulfillment while feeding you emptiness. So maybe it's time to stop chasing. Not because you've given up, but because you've woken up. Maybe the real act of rebellion isn't becoming happy. It's becoming aware. Aware that the game is rigged. Aware that your soul is exhausted not because it's weak, but because it's sensitive and still alive. And maybe, just maybe, there's a different way to live. Not by pursuing happiness, but by escaping the illusions that drain you. You're not just exhausted. You wake up tired. You go to bed tired. You cancel plans not because you're busy, but because you have nothing left to give. You stare at screens. You scroll through life. And no matter how much sleep you get, your soul stays heavy. This isn't just burnout. It's something deeper. Something darker. It's spiritual depletion. But no one talks about that. Mainstream culture treats burnout like a productivity glitch. Take a break, they say. Go on vacation, reset, recharge. But what if your battery isn't just low? What if the charger itself is broken? What if the entire system is draining you? Schopenhauer saw this coming long before burnout was a buzzword, because modern burnout isn't about working too much. It's about meaning too little. It's not just the hours you give, it's what you're giving them to. You wake up, go to a job you hate, smile for people you don't trust, check boxes that lead nowhere, earn money that disappears into bills, all while your passions die quietly in the corner. And the worst part, you can't even scream about it, because everyone else is doing it too. Everyone else is coping, wearing productivity like a badge, grinding themselves into spiritual decay in the name of success. You feel like a ghost in your own life. And still the world tells you to push through. But Schopenhauer would tell you, stop pushing. Start seeing. Burnout isn't just physical fatigue. It's the spiritual consequence of living out of alignment, of betraying your inner world to meet outer expectations. It's what happens when your soul whispers, "This isn't me," and you keep going anyway. Schopenhauer believed that most people spend their lives fleeing pain, not pursuing truth. They run from boredom, loneliness, insignificance, and in doing so, they fill their lives with noise. Endless stimulation, endless distraction, but never stillness, never depth. And this avoidance comes at a cost, because the more you avoid yourself, the more burned out you become. Not from effort, but from emptiness. This is the burnout no one talks about, the burnout of pretending, of smiling when you're screaming inside, of keeping up appearances while you fall apart in silence. It's spiritual erosion, and healing it isn't about self-care routines, scented candles, or weekend getaways. It's about truth. It's about asking the uncomfortable questions. Who am I outside of what I do? What have I sacrificed for approval? What parts of me have I silenced just to fit in? These are questions most people never ask, because they're afraid of the answers, but Schopenhauer wasn't. He stared into the abyss and invited us to do the same. Not to scare us, but to awaken us. Because only when you confront the darkness can you begin to move through it. So if you're feeling lost, hollow, disconnected, you're not broken. You're waking up to a world that never had. your best interests in mind. Waking up to truths your spirit can no longer ignore. Waking up to the realization that surviving is not the same as living, and that's where healing begins. Not with more effort, but with honesty. If life is suffering, what then is the cure? Schopenhauer, as bleak as he often seemed, didn't leave us in despair. He offered an antidote, not one rooted in optimism or hope, but in liberation, a momentary escape from the tyranny of the will. But what exactly is the will? For Schopenhauer, the will is not just desire. It's the engine of all existence, the blind, irrational force that pushes us to want, to crave, to chase, and to suffer. And as long as we're trapped inside its pull, we are restless, always wanting, never fulfilled. But then there are rare moments that silence the chaos. Moments where the will fades, and something else emerges. You've felt it before. In front of a painting that stilled your breath. In the swell of a symphony that made your heart ache. In a poem that captured your pain so perfectly. It felt like it knew you. These moments, Schopenhauer said, are aesthetic experiences, and they are our only real escape from the torment of existence, because when you're fully absorbed in beauty, you stop wanting, you stop needing, you just are. In that silence there is peace. Art, in this view, is not entertainment. It's transcendence. It lifts us out of ourselves, out of our pain, out of our hunger, out of our striving. A great painting doesn't offer answers, it offers stillness. A moving piece of music doesn't solve your problems. It simply makes them dissolve, if only for a few minutes. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he said that through art, we are no longer individual. The pain of life disappears. That doesn't mean art cures suffering, but it interrupts it. It breaks the loop. And in a world obsessed with outcomes, success, and utility, that interruption is radical, because beauty doesn't ask you to win. It doesn't demand you improve. It simply invites you to see, to feel, to be, fully, without condition. And that is the deepest form of healing. It's why we return to art when words fail, why we play sad songs when we're broken, why we stare at the ocean when we feel empty, not to fix ourselves, but to remember ourselves. In a society that commodifies your pain, art restores your humanity. It gives you back what the world takes away: stillness, presence, meaning. And this, Schopenhauer believed, was our highest calling. Not to conquer the will, but to step outside of it. Not to dominate life, but to observe it without needing anything from it. That is why he elevated artists and philosophers, not because they had answers, but because they were witnesses. They saw through the illusion, and they translated that truth into something we could feel. So maybe you don't need more productivity hacks. Maybe you don't need to fix your mindset. Maybe what your spirit craves isn't victory, but peace. And maybe, just maybe, peace comes not from having less chaos, but from finding moments that quiet it. You don't need to escape your life, just the will that makes you feel like you're never enough. Find those moments, through art, through silence, through the awe of existence itself. Because in those moments you are not a consumer, you are not a failure, you are not a brand, or a profile, or a project. You are simply alive, and for a brief second, that is enough. You're never alone anymore, not truly, not with 1,000 voices buzzing in your pocket, not with algorithms whispering what to think, buy, feel, fear. Silence? That's a luxury we've replaced with noise. The moment of stillness feels unbearable, like something's wrong. So we scroll, click, tap, swipe, not because we're curious, but because we're afraid of being alone with our own thoughts, afraid of the truth that might emerge when the noise dies down. We have built a culture where distraction is not just normal, it's survival. We run from silence like it's a threat. But in truth, it's the only space where we can truly meet ourselves. Schopenhauer warned of this internal war long before smartphones, before clickbait, before TikTok loops. He saw that the human being, when left alone, is forced to confront the rawness of existence, the futility, the suffering, the hollow chase of desire. So what did we do? We engineered an entire world to never be alone again. We don't sit with discomfort. We outsource it. We don't reflect. We react. We don't process emotions. We post them. The self has been fractured into content, turned into metrics, reduced to impressions. And the result? A generation of souls constantly stimulated, yet spiritually starved. You feel it when you're supposed to be relaxing, but check your phone every 30 seconds. You feel it when you can't fall asleep without background noise. You feel it when you haven't had a single quiet thought in days, only fragments. Because stillness has been hunted down and killed by modernity. Why? Because stillness is dangerous. Silence is subversive. In silence, you begin to see through things. Through systems, through illusions, through your own conditioned mind. And that's exactly what society doesn't want. Because if you paused long enough to ask, why am I doing this? You might stop playing the game. You might stop consuming what you don't need. You might stop obeying without questioning. You might stop living a life that isn't yours. Schopenhauer believed that silence was not just the absence of sound. It was the presence of truth. That's why great art, great thought, great awareness emerge from stillness. But we've been trained to believe the opposite. We confuse noise with value, busyness with purpose, constant movement with progress. We've internalized the propaganda of motion. If you're not hustling, you're falling behind. If you're resting, you're losing. If you're quiet, you're irrelevant. And in that chaos, our inner lives decay. The war on silence is a war on the soul. You begin to forget what your own voice sounds like, what peace feels like, what presence is. And that's no accident. Because a silent, self-aware, spiritually grounded individual, that person can't be controlled, can't be sold to, can't be manipulated. That person becomes a threat to a system that profits from your confusion. So here's the truth. No one tells you. Your exhaustion isn't a personal failure. It's the natural outcome of living in a world that punishes introspection and rewards disconnection. But you can step out of it. Not by running away, but by returning. To what? To your breath. To your senses. To your thoughts. To yourself. Stillness is not emptiness, it's presence. And in that presence, you begin to remember what it feels like to exist beyond demand. That is the beginning of healing, not through noise, but through silence. It always feels like something's missing, doesn't it? A better job, a perfect relationship, a more disciplined mind, another achievement, another escape. And so we chase, like shadows under moonlight. We run toward things we believe will make us whole. But no matter how fast we run, the finish line always moves. This is the great trap of modern life. It teaches us that meaning lies just ahead. Just one more milestone, one more upgrade, one more version of ourselves we haven't become yet. But Schopenhauer, cold, sharp, honest, ripped through that illusion like a knife through fog. He didn't tell us to chase harder. He told us to see, to stop mistaking the fire of desire for the light of truth, to stop thinking we can escape suffering through more control, more striving, more success. Because when everything becomes a goal, even peace becomes a performance. And, in that endless chase, we exhaust the soul, the burnout you feel, the emptiness, the ache you can't name. It's not because you're broken. It's because you've been taught to look outward for something that was never out there. You're not just tired. You're spiritually malnourished, disconnected from silence, disoriented by illusion, dissolved into a culture that equates your value with your productivity and your identity with your output. But here's what Schopenhauer dared to whisper, something most systems of power hope you never realize. You don't have to win this game. You don't have to become anything more to be worthy of rest. You don't have to chase meaning in a world that commodifies your soul. You can simply stop, not in defeat, but in awakening. Because only when you stop running do you finally see the prison you were trapped in, and only then do you realize the bars were always made of wanting more, wanting different, wanting anything but this. But this is all there ever is. The breath you just took, the silence between these words, the strange, unbearable beauty of simply being. That is not a failure of ambition. It's the birth of wisdom. Schopenhauer didn't promise bliss, he promised clarity. He didn't tell you how to be happy. He showed you how to stop lying to yourself about what happiness even is. Because the moment you stop chasing, you start seeing. And what you see is this: the world is insane. It demands you sacrifice your soul for status. It sells you solutions to problems it created. It teaches you that burnout is a badge of honor. But you can opt out. You can build a different kind of strength. Not the strength to push through pain, but the strength to question why you're always in pain. You can reclaim your inner life, not by running faster, but by going inward, through art, through philosophy, through silence, not to escape reality, but to finally face it, and in doing so, to finally become real. Because once you understand this truth, you'll never look at exhaustion the same way again. You'll know it's not a glitch in your system, it is the system. And your soul has been trying to warn you all along. So stop chasing, start seeing, and in that seeing, begin to remember who you were before. The world told you who to be.